And welcome to the Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 5 years ago and nearly 6 years ago, just to help people stay connected through stories. And it's been so much fun. We've been back pretty much every Wednesday since. Welcome to those of you returning, and welcome back. Oh, sorry, welcome back to those returning, and welcome to the new people. That's how it works. Okay. But as always, we have two writers reading their own work for us. Tonight's readers are Karl Dandenell and Frank Oreto. If you are here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you're joining us on YouTube, feel free to enjoy the stories without any pressures of socialization. And it would be super nice, though, if you would subscribe or leave a comment or something, because, the stories need love. So our first reader tonight is Karl Dandenell. Karl Dandenell is a graduate of Viable Paradise and a full member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, SIFWA to the initiated. He didn't say initiated. That's editorializing. He and his family, plus their feline overlords, live on an island near San Francisco, famous for its Victorian architecture and low-speed traffic. Karl has published over 50 works of fiction and about 2 poems. I guess the poems must be totally true, right? In the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. His latest novella, Between the Stars I Found Her, is available from Wild Blood Press or that Big River place. Go with Wild Blood. They're really nice. Wild Blood with a Y. Follow his occasional posts on Blue Sky, Karl Dandenell at bsky.social, and read more about his fiction on firewombats.com. Karl,
That's me.
welcome back.
Good to be back. Good to be back. So, I have a story tonight, Copper Bright as the Sun. There is a content note here. There is violence and death involving a dragon and human beings. The humans totally deserve it. So, we'll go with that. All right.
But Karl,
Yes.
I've got to ask, before you dive in, could you show us your book cover?
Oh, of course. My goodness. Here we go.
Oh, it's so pretty.
It is very pretty.
Yeah, look at us, Karl. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now I'm ready for the story.
Now we're ready. Okay, Copper Bright as the Sun. The painting was huge and garish, covering the entire wall above the inn's fireplace. It's obvious the artist was more interested in spectacle than accuracy in his interpretation of Sir Hugh's battle with the dragon. The monster was pierced by not one but 2 lances, and black blood spurted from either wound like a grotesque fountain. Sir Hugh himself was a head taller and a stone heavier than he was in life. Even the golden device on his shield reflected the sun, though to be honest, the daily assault by the inn's candles and wood smoke had muted all the colors. My visitors were disappointed. "That's it? We want to see the dragon's head," said a white-haired fellow when I brought them tankards of ale. "Why else would we come to the famous Red Dragon Inn?" He and his 2 companions wore light cotton clothing, with their family crest stitched in expensive silver thread along cuff and collar. More than likely, they were Southern traders seeking royal contracts. "I'm sorry," I said, deploying my carefully cultivated smile. "If you wish, you can take your carriage up to the castle and see the head mounted smack over the drawbridge." The royal taxidermist had cleaned the head up nicely, replacing the eyes with enormous rubies from the dragon's hoard. Months later, the thing still terrified me. "Allow me to explain," I continued. "The king did offer the head to me, since it was my master who killed the dragon. However, I felt unworthy of such a prize. Then, to forestall any further complaints, I told them the day's offering: venison pie and mushrooms. Or perhaps they would like to rest in our comfortable beds after their long journey. As I described our feather beds, they noticed the missing fingers of my left hand. and the scars that mapped my cheek and neck. "You're Sir Hugh's squire," said Whitehair, a Millhard. To his left sat a Grosjean, who added, "The one who left his master's sword behind." He didn't say the recreant, but I heard it nonetheless. I was his squire? Yes. They weren't wrong. When Sir Hugh had charged the dragon, I stood petrified, warm piss running down into my new boots. All I managed in that moment was to pray to the Blessed Lady through dry lips, pray the dragon wouldn't notice me, pray I'd see another sunrise. "So what happened?" said the third traitor, Berlioz. "Buy another round, good man, and I'll tell you the whole tale." They grumbled, but agreed. I signaled Gavin, the cook, who brought more ale. The traders paid with a silver stag. I gave them their change and polished copper pennies for my apron. My inn was known for its bright coins and food suffused with expensive spices. Gavin's tray also held a glass of strong brandy for me. As a former man-at-arms, he understood the need to be good and drunk to tell such tales. "I dreamed my whole life about becoming a knight," I said, leaning against the room's central post to ease the dull ache in my leg. "I used to sit with customers, but soon learned people preferred me at a distance, as if my cowardice were catching. My family owned an inn of similar means, and when I wasn't washing plates or mucking out the stables, I sat in the common room and listened to everyone's stories, particularly the ones about knights. They're the best, don't you agree? Such adventure, such bravery. When I reached my 12th year, I announced my desire to carry a sword and defeat all the kingdom's monsters. My father pondered this for a moment before fetching his axe. "Start with this," he said. "See that old tree? It's a terrible monster that threatens the entire kingdom. Chop it into firewood and save us all." He laughed and returned to his ledger. "Well, did you save the kingdom?" scoffed Grosjean. He was the youngest of them, his beard hardly an aspiration. "Twice." I'd learned to keep my dreams to myself after that, especially after my father began developing more challenging quests like raising the inn's fortifications, which meant hauling stone from the quarry to repair the sheep fence. When the Blessed Lady took my parents to her bosom, I sold the inn and came here to the capital. It's so expensive compared to the provinces. In no time, I'd spent half the money I had on room and board and bards, trying to learn everything. The rest, well, having no family connections, I needed to pay for introductions. All the knights turned me down. All that is, except Sir Hugh. He said he admired my spirit and accepted my service. I learned later that Sir Hugh had little standing at court and even less money to pay me. Get to the good part. One moment. I tossed another bundle of dried lavender and jasmine into the fire. The smoke was strong and sweet, softening the usual muddled odor of spilled beer and sweaty bodies. Where was I? Oh, yes. Sir Hugh and I had traveled the length and breadth of the kingdom. He dispensed justice and taught me the knightly code, though I will admit there were times, we had poor shelter and few provisions, that I began to wonder if there wasn't more to chivalry than stringing up the occasional brigand. We never rescued maidens or consorted with other knights. So one day I asked the Blessed Lady for a sign. I drained half my glass, the liquor caressing my throat like a lover. With my maimed hand, I pointed at the painting. Not long after I burned an offering to the Blessed Lady of 3 perfect jasmine blossoms, that beast swept into the kingdom, the first dragon in living memory. It devoured every sheep in 3 provinces before the king called for a quest to slay it. I was thrilled when Sir Hugh stepped forward. A wiser person might have wondered why the other knights were so eager to let him claim the glory. However, I was young and stupid, drunk on bards' tales and Sir Hugh's boasts. I finished my glass. I remember the day well. It was a clear sky, and we followed a trail of burned and empty farms to the dragon's lair. The sun was almost directly overhead, not a shadow to speak of. I shook my head. You wouldn't believe that something so large, so monstrous, could move so quietly. But it did. Between one breath and the next, it was just there, yawning. What? Said Milhard, like it just woke up? I? Yawning and stretching like a cat warming itself in the sun. There were a few chuckles and declarations of incredulity, as usual. Sir Hugh wasted no time, I said, my words more confident as the brandy worked its familiar magic. He issued the proper challenges and rode his piebald stallion full speed down an embankment and skewered the foul thing. Oh, yes, he drove his lance right into the neck. The collision was a thunderclap. The traders cheered, cups slammed on the table. The monster fought savagely, but in the end, blessed lady, Sir Hugh was triumphant. Alas, the brave knight later died from his wounds. Then I shared a convincing tear and raised my empty glass. Gavin refilled it so we might toast the victorious Sir Hugh. May his name live forever. My name has already been forgotten. Now I was known only as a failed squire and a crippled innkeeper. Our local bard, Armel, struck up a newly popular song, The Red Dragon's Demise. As the coins flowed into his bowl, I clenched my teeth painfully to sustain my smile. The story was pure pig maneuver. The truth was, after Sir Hugh had struck the first blow, the dragon knocked him from his warhorse and broke off the lance. Then, quick as a diving falcon, it seized him, piercing his armor as if it were burlap. 'Twas no melee, no give or take, just 100-foot lizard playing with its prey, much like the inn's cat. But this prey was neither a mouse nor moth. It was a screaming man. I'd fallen to my knees and spewed up my breakfast, but couldn't stop watching. The battle soon became a bloody race twixt the poison on Sir Hugh's lance and the dragon's vitality. It was a near thing, too. After finally dispatching Sir Hugh, the monster spread its wings and smashed aside trees, roaring its pain as the poison coursed through its veins. As long as I lived, I never wished to hear such a sound again. Then it loosed its terrible breath. That's when I found the will to run away. Not fast enough, though. My scars were a testament to my hesitation. There was a pause while the bard pocketed his earnings. In the quiet, Grosjean shouted, "What about the treasure, innkeeper?" It was a serious question once. Now it rang false as a rooster announcing noon. "Oh, such treasure," I said. "Piles of gold and precious stones at least 12 hands high. 20 strong men and 4 carts it took to bring everything back. The round trip had taken 3 miserable days, during which my hands were bound and my horse tied to another's lest I ride off to claim the prize for myself. My wounds bled afresh with every mile." The traders whispered among themselves. Milhard sniffed like a cook inspecting a questionable cut of meat. Then he lowered his voice. "Come on, lad. Surely you kept a little for yourself. Buried some gold in the forest. You can tell us." His smile said, "We could help you dig it out. Trust us." Alas, there wasn't time. The line was honed to a fine edge. Sir Hugh needed a healer badly, and I dared not delay. But Sir Hugh and his warhorse were already dead. My own wounds prevented me from burying him or even fashioning a litter to carry the body home. Instead, I had to settle for building a cairn with small stones. It was a crude affair, and I prayed the Blessed Lady would accept my efforts. Once I'd discharged my spiritual duties, however, I dug through the great dragon's hoard, hampered by my fatigue and ignorance. Silver and copper were the stock and trade of innkeepers, not gold and gems. I couldn't adjudge the value of what lay at my feet. I found all manner of coins, stamped with the faces of kings, or perhaps the old emperors. Hands in time had smoothed away details, leaving only an outline of nobility. They felt solid and heavy between my teeth, though, so I filled the saddlebag. With each fistful, I began to map out my future as a proper knight. I would outfit myself with arms and armor and trained steed, all much grander than Sir Hugh's. Then I would build a house and court a noble lady. She would bear me strong sons and daughters. Yes, I thought, struggling to close the saddlebag with my uninjured hand. Everything was possible now. When I emerged from the lair, it was late afternoon. I was weary, hungry, wincing with pain. The air reeked so severely of burned flesh and sharp, flinty odor of dragon that I decided to make camp upwind and redress my wounds as best I could. Perhaps I could eat something and rest a few hours. If I was going to collect more gold, I would need my strength. As I dragged the heavy saddlebag to my horse, the dragon's eyes fluttered open. Silent words slid into my brain like a cold, sharp knife. "I am dying, man," they said, "but I have laid a clutch deep in the mountains where you will never find it. When my dragonettes emerge, they will seek out my scent, having tasted it in the egg. They will hunt down everything I have ever touched here, every coin, every ruby, every pearl dreaming of the sea, and they will burn anyone who carries the scent. They will burn you." There are few tales and songs that touch upon conversations with dragons, and all of them eschewed any mention of the hatred now directed at me. Centuries of malice lay behind it. I realized with sadness and horror that this dragon must have been one of the ancient ones, come from the egg before men tilled the first farms, before we forged the first spears, before we created the myths of nobility and chivalry, and my master had killed it. We had forgotten we were barely more than beasts, but dragons never forget a slight. All the stories were in accord regarding this matter. The dragon's eyes closed, and a wisp of smoke drifted from between its fangs. "So, enjoy my treasure while you can." I dropped my saddlebag then and rode pell-mell until I found a stream we'd crossed the previous day. There I stripped naked and washed in the moonlight, scrubbing myself with sand until I cried in agony. Once I was clean, I donned my only unsullied garment, a muslin nightshirt, abandoning all else to the water. If the blessed lady were watching, perhaps the stream would scatter the dragon's scent far, far downstream, hide it among the marsh reeds and walks. I made a miserable camp and resumed my journey at sunrise. "If you didn't get a share of the treasure," prompted Grosjean impatiently. The guttering of a beeswax candle brought me back to the present. "I received this." My gesture took in the common room. "Since I refused the dragon's head, the king bade me take some other boon for my service. I asked him for this inn." "Why?" "Well, as it happens, this was the first place I stayed at the capital. It holds a special place in my heart." That was only partially true. The first boon I'd requested was a knighthood, but the king just shook his head. "How can a crippled man bear arms?" Then I asked for the hand of a genteel woman, so that I might have sons to carry on my name. Again the king refused. "What woman would be happy with your visage? Nay, ask me something else, but speak quickly. My patience is limited." In frustration, I said, "At least give me an inn, some place where I might earn an honest living like my father." The king said it was a fair bargain, I continued. The court had delighted with this pronouncement, chortling at my rustic ways. His steward suggested I call it the Red Dragon Inn to bring in more business, and for the most part they were right. My laughter was well rehearsed and encouraged others to join in, but Milhard did not laugh with his companions. "You are a fool," he said. "If I'd found a dragon hoard, I'd stuffed my pockets full and disappeared. Bought my own inn. Better ale than this." "Whether I'm a fool, I do not know," I said. "However, I do know we have a barrel of fine southern ale that may please you." I turned to the cabin. Cabin! After the candles burned down and the guests repaired to their rooms, I took the lockbox to the basement, where a tub of hot, soapy water awaited. I piled my clothes to the side, added extra rose and geranium oils to the tub, and scrubbed with a boar bristle brush. Scrubbed my hands, scrubbed my arms, scrubbed any skin that might have brushed against a customer. I used to question whether this was necessary, whether the dragon was telling the truth or simply sought to curse me with doubt and fear. Then incandescent, scream-filled nightmares sent me downstairs to fill the tub again. When my skin was red and clean, I washed the coins. There were silver stags and copper pennies, all worn by many hands. No gold, though. Nothing to interest a dragon. I put a few pennies in the lockbox to pay the butcher and the baker. The rest went into a dusty sack hidden behind a jar of fermented fish. Even clothes, the jar was so pungent, I didn't fear anyone would ever uncover my trove. Heavy steps announced Gavin. I washed my hands a final time and drew on fresh linens and hose. I'm off to bed unless you still need me, he said with a yawn. The scent of his whale oil lamp was salty as the sea. Did you check on the merchants? Aye? Brought them a fresh chamber pot like they wanted. They was arguing at the window. What about? I asked. Bats. That one with the poor excuse for a beard claimed he'd seen bats crossing in front of the moon, said Gavin. Big as cows. But the other said he couldn't hold his drink. He'd probably change his story come breakfast. Probably. I swallowed against a dry throat. My scars throbbed with remembered pain. I meant to tell you, Gavin, I must away for a day, perhaps two. Keep an eye on things until I return. I'll do that. Safe travels. He crept upstairs. Stories about dragons hold scant lore about their offspring. What they did say was dragons emerge from the egg ready to fly, ready to eat. With shaking hands, I retrieved my stash, the lockbox and key I'd left behind for Gavin. He could have the end if he wished. It no longer mattered to me. The moon was bright. I limped to the barn, burdened only with a small rucksack and a thick cloak. Saddling my horse took long minutes, and I cursed every time the cinch slipped from my crippled hand. Finally, though, I managed to set the animals a bit, and we headed off at a steady trot, away from the castle and its grisly attraction. The harbor wasn't far away. With luck, I could catch the morning tide. I had enough silver to book passage to the northern lands, where wild men traded bear pelts, and there were no knights or dragons to devour them. At least, that's what the stories said. Thank you.
Carl, I don't think I've ever seen such an illustration of dirty money. I really enjoyed that. But you're right, I feel really bad for the dragon. Well, it is our way at Story Hour to just take a moment between the readers because we need a moment to absorb the first story, breathe in the scent of it, however you absorb it. Take and just ready ourselves for a new one. Everybody, that was Karl Dandenell. And our next reader tonight is Frank Oreto. Frank Oreto is a writer of weird and horrific fiction living in the wilds of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His works have haunted the pages of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, the year's best hardcore horror, and Flame Tree Press, and his stories have been screamed out into the abyss on podcasts such as Pseudopod, the No Sleep Podcast, and Tales to Terrify. His first collection, It's Dark in Here, 21 Tales of Terror and one poem about squirrels, came out in 2025. You can look him up at frankoreto.com. Frank, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I have a story to tell. Go figure. Mm-hmm. All right. So I don't really have any trigger warnings, but I did remember I am derogatory towards yodeling. So if you're a yodel lover, and just be aware. I don't want to hurt any feelings, step on any yodeling toes. So,
and is it in the book that you're holding?
It is. It's in this book. It's Dark in Here 21 weird tales and one poem about squirrels. So there you are. And that's the cover. And this was
Mhm.
not easy, this cover. I mean, I had to, stay on that pig during the preliminary sketches. It took a while. So I'm just letting you know.
I did not realize pig rodeo was a thing.
It
Sounds
most
very dangerous, Frank.
it is.
You sacrifice a lot for your art.
I do. I do. And I appreciate you appreciating that. All right. So, shall we?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to work. The Great Should Have Been by me, Frank Oreto. A siren howled. Freddie tracked it out of habit, maybe a quarter of a mile away, heading south. He laughed, then hissed and pressed a palm to his bandaged side. Cops weren't a worry anymore. He held up his hand and blinked at his own blood. Just a little seepage, he told himself. Panic and pain gave him the shakes. He slowed the car until the tremors passed. A robotic voice spoke through the speakers. At the next stop sign, turn left on Montgomery Avenue. Freddie glanced down at the phone. Not far now. This is crazy. I should go find that cop I heard, or call the FBI. But he didn't think they'd cut him a deal. You don't get immunity with a dead man in your trunk. Pittsburgh should be all right for a day or two at least, but he wasn't sure. He hadn't changed cars, hadn't even switched plates. Things had gone to shit too fast. He had one more stop. If Alan couldn't do what Freddie thought he could, then what? Bleed out in some no-name motel? More likely, a bullet behind the ear. He hadn't seen a tail, but a good tale didn't get seen. I'm not a bad man, he whispered, knowing it for a lie. I wasn't always. That felt more right. 1,000 wrong choices, some pride, some greed, running into the wrong guy at a bar. I wasn't always. Maybe that's why I'm really going to Allen's. I need to be around someone who knew me before I screwed it all up. But it wasn't just that. Freddie believed. It was a crazy theory, and what did he have to back it up with? A recurring dream, 20-year-old memories, desperation. But he remembered riding his skateboard through the high school cafeteria. He remembered watching the paint run down Chet Holman's football jersey. And despite the bullet and the body in the trunk, Freddie felt hope. Arrived at destination, the phone announced. The house was a small brick two-story with a postage stamp front yard. No toys lay in the grass or on the porch. Good. Kids would make this thing harder. Freddie parked and got out of the car, pulling on his suit coat to cover the blood spots. He left the gun. He might have to beg, but Freddie didn't think force would work. He winced a little when he stood, but the pain was bearable. Freddie knocked. Muffled sounds came from inside, and then the door swung open. Alan stood in the entrance. Freddie took a minute to be sure, his mind adding pounds and redistributing hair on the high school memory of Alan he carried in his head. Alan must have been doing the same because at first, no recognition appeared behind the man's wireless spectacles. Then an unsure smile began to grow. Freddie? Freddie nodded. Yeah, in the flesh. Jesus, what are you doing here? Alan sounded surprised and a little annoyed. You should have called. You obviously know where I live. You couldn't friend me on Facebook or something? They stood there, neither moving. Freddie suddenly felt convinced that Alan knew about the body in the trunk and the men who wanted Freddie dead. You got even skinnier, you lucky bastard, Alan finally said, and his smile grew more genuine. You didn't, said Freddie. They laughed, and Freddie's suspicions melted away in that familiar sound. Well, come on in. Let me get you a beer. The door opened into a small living room. Laundry lay half folded on a sectional sofa. An empty plate sat on the coffee table in front of the TV. While Alan went for beer, Freddie lowered himself onto the couch with a gasp. It's good to see you. Surprising, but good, Alan called from the kitchen. Glass clinked, and he bustled back in, holding 2 beers. Hope your taste in suds hasn't improved. Alan sat on the sofa's other section, took a swig from his bottle. How's Philly? You still in the old neighborhood? Freddie sighed and took a pull from his own drink. He didn't know how to start. Silence filled the space between the 2 men, not the comfortable kind. Alan leaned forward, his smile uneasy again. What? You show up out of the blue and you don't talk? No kids? Freddie asked. No, yeah. I got 2 girls, twins. They're not here is all. The smile disappeared altogether now. They live with their mother in Tennessee. She got remarried to a guy who writes songs. An honest to goddamn cowboy, if you want to know the truth. Now, why don't you tell me what's going on? A car drove by outside. Freddie's eyes followed the sound. You worried about somebody else dropping by? Freddie waited until the car had moved on. You remember riding skateboards through the cafeteria? Alan looked blank for a moment, then chuckled. The ramps, he said. Thank God for handicapped access. And you jumped and landed on the table? Whose lunch were you standing in? Marjorie Holmes, Freddie said. I had a giant crush on her. There I was, standing on her tater tots. I think she was impressed, though, right? Later, didn't you two? You know. Yeah, those 2 weeks of detention were so worth it. Silence again, even if a bit more pleasant. You know, in that suit, with your hair all slicked back, Freddie, you look like Central Casting's idea of a mobster. Do I? Asked Freddie. That's funny. Another car drove by. This time, both men stayed silent until it passed. What kind of trouble did you bring with you? It never happened, said Freddie. What? Skateboarding in the cafeteria. It didn't happen. Of course it happened, said Alan. We were both there, along with what? 150 assorted students and teachers? Yeah, it happened, but you made it happen. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I have these dreams. Dreams? You're not making any sense, Freddie. Shit. Listen. Okay. Freddie sagged on the couch, his strength gone. He didn't think he could stand up. Doesn't it seem crazy? We ride the skateboards through the cafeteria. I catch some big air and land standing up on a table in front of the girl I've been jonesing for since 8th grade. It was something right out of a movie. Okay, said Alan, but it happened. How about the time we catapulted cans of paint onto the football team? Freaking bullseye. Paint all over them. Nobody gets hurt. No cans smash into some kid and put him in the hospital. Hell, it was a miracle we hit them at all. I tried it about a year ago. Took a board, laid it over a cinder block, put a brick on one end and stomped on the other. The brick went in the right direction exactly one time. And even then it nearly took my head off. What we did shouldn't have been possible. The paint catapult, the skateboarding, half a dozen other things. It was all too perfect. Alan shrugged. Well, so what? I think about those times in high school a lot. Maybe a little too much, said Alan. Everything we worked out. But after you moved, things changed. Nothing came easy anymore. I started to wonder, why couldn't my life be more like high school? Jesus, Freddie, you sound like a bad Springsteen song, except you're crazy on top of being pathetic. Sure, we pulled off some amazing shit, but just because the rest of your life, Alan paused, hell, Let's be honest, just because the rest of both our lives haven't measured up to those years, it doesn't mean they didn't happen. Alan's eyes strayed down to the side of Freddie's suit coat. Are you bleeding? That's it, Freddie. I'm calling somebody. Ambulance, police, or both. Alan stood and pulled his phone out of his jeans pocket. I started having these dreams, Freddie said. He wasn't worried about Alan calling the authorities. If things went south, it would happen before an ambulance or cops could arrive. Unnoticed by Alan, another car had come up the street. And this one, Freddie could hear idling in front of the house. The dreams weren't about the crazy shit we did, he said. They were about the great should have been. Alan stopped, looked up from his phone. Freddie went on, in the dreams, that's what you called it. We'd sit on that old flea-bitten couch in your basement, and you'd say, today should have been different. And the great should have been, we rode our skateboards right down the goddamned handicapped ramps and blasted through the cafeteria like rockets. You told that story so good and so true that I could see it. I could feel the wind pushing back my hair, hear the other kids cheering. We both felt it. Then, somehow, your story changed the world. The great should have been turned into what was. Alan sat down. He still held the phone, but he hadn't called anyone. You ever have dreams like that, Alan? From the look on Alan's face, Freddie thought he had. The thing is, I think those dreams are my real memories. Two teenage losers wishing their lives were like the movies. Except, somehow, your stories made it happen. Alan shook his head. You're just remembering when we came up with the ideas. Like you said, all that crazy shit went off without a hitch. We must have spent a lot of time planning it, right? What Alan said made sense. So much that Freddie flinched at the words, but he went on. I need you to tell me how my life turned out after high school, Alan. I need you to tell me the great should have been version. And what? Alan's voice bordered on a yell. You'll live happily ever after? Do you know how many times I fantasized about how much better my life could have turned out? But here I am, alone. If I had that kind of power, do you think my wife would have left me for Hopalong, the yodeling asshole? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're crazy. I can't just tell a story and make everything better. You have to, Alan, Freddie said. If you don't come up with a new story, then we're stuck with mine. And I'm goddamn sure you won't like it. In my story, there's a car parked out in front of this house with some very serious people inside. They're looking for a guy who made a big freaking mistake back in Philly. Hell, he'd made a lot of mistakes along the way, but this one was one to beat the band. The wrong people got hurt, and the wrong people lost money. Those serious men are going to figure out which house I'm in, and, well, I won't spoil the ending. You son of a bitch! What if my kids were here? I know. I'm sorry. I got no excuses. The engine that had been idling outside shut off. Alan's eyes went to the door, then back to Freddie. It won't work. It will. Now that we're together again, you just needed the right audience. I figure the two of us were like some sort of mystic circuit connecting. Come on, man. What the hell do you have to lose? I'm nuts for doing this. Alan took a deep breath. I don't know how you screwed your life up this badly, but here's what should have happened. Say the words. Don't interrupt, said Alan. And the great should have been, we stayed in touch after high school. You'd take a Greyhound over from Philly and spend the weekend. I was going to community college and convinced you to move to Pittsburgh and try a few classes. Freddie heard car doors slamming outside in low voices. They wouldn't know which house. He tried to pay attention to Alan. What classes did I take? Film studies. You figured going to the movies couldn't be too hard. But you didn't like the films they showed, not enough car chases. They put you behind the camera, though, and you liked that fine. You even helped make a student film, zombies and crap. The film got a C, but the professor said your technical work showed a lot of promise. It wasn't happening. Freddie felt the panic coming back. He was going to die on his old friend's couch. Then you met Brenda, said Alan. Brenda? Yeah. You dropped out of college after a couple of semesters. No surprise, right? Started bartending. You didn't meet Brenda at the bar, though. You met her at church. My mom made us go to Mass every Sunday. You turned around in the middle of an also with you, and there she was, giving you the eye. She was big, almost 6 feet, head full of teased out platinum hair, Steelers earrings. Not your type, but she was pretty and not a bit shy. She asked you out. You slept together on the first date, one and done in your mind, but Brenda had other ideas. Brenda, Freddie said again. The name felt familiar, as if he'd said it 1,000 times. The air thickened in his lungs. I'm probably bleeding out, he thought, but he hoped it was something else. Yeah, she wouldn't leave you alone. She'd come to the bar where you work, boss you around, make you laugh, wearing down your defenses. I liked her. She cursed like a sailor and was a hell of a lot smarter than either of us. She was the best thing that ever happened to you, and deep down, you knew it. I was best man at your wedding. Freddie heard a sound like tearing cloth inside his head. He could have sworn Alan was glowing. Brenda's cousin owned a plumbing company. I became a plumber? Freddie mumbled. A knock came at the door. Both Alan and Freddie's eyes shot toward the noise, then locked back on each other. No, shut up and listen. Alan's words spilled out high and fast. Brenda knew about your film production classes. She convinced her cousin to let you shoot a commercial film for him. You wrote it, Freddie said, his voice proud and excited, like a kid in class who knew the answer. The one where the little old lady keeps getting bleeped when she says shit. People liked it, said Alan. We did a few more commercials, started our own little production company. Your marriage was good, ups and downs, of course, but you guys kept it together. Having you two around probably saved my own marriage. Gave me and Marcy an example of how things could be. Another knock sounded against the front door, heavier this time. Alan sat very still and looked at Freddie. So, did it work? Or are we about to get shot? Freddie, honestly, wasn't sure. He gathered his legs beneath him and stood up. His side hurt, then it didn't. Then it hurt again. He crossed the room to the door. The words of Alan's story seemed to hang in the air all around him. Don't open it, Alan said. Freddie grasped the knob. Another knock came, hard enough to rattle the door in its frame. Hey, babe, Freddie said as he pulled open the door and chose to believe. A shot rang out. A man screamed. What the hell are you guys watching? Brenda asked after she'd given Freddie a quick but thorough kiss. Alan grabbed the TV remote and turned down the volume. It's the new commercial. We're going for a bit of a Mean Streets vibe. He looked dazed. Brenda held her husband in a half embrace. Freddie leaned on her for a moment, tasting the kiss, inhaling the new but somehow familiar scent of the woman. You all right, babe? Brenda asked. How many beers did you and Alan put away? I'm good, Freddie said. In fact, I'm great. He really was. The bullet in his side was gone. So was the suit, replaced with khakis and a flannel shirt, and then 20 extra pounds. Freddie looked toward Alan, but Alan was staring at a little girl in unicorn pajamas standing on the stairs. He shot a stunned look back at Freddie, tears streaming down his face. I can't sleep, the girl announced. Hi, Aunt Brenda. Alan ran up the stairs and lifted her into his arms. Is your sister awake? He asked. Nope, she said. Mommy's asleep too. She's snoring. Yeah, she does that, Alan laughing through his tears. You're crying, Daddy. What's wrong? I'm not sure, said Alan. He carried the girl to where Brenda and Freddie stood and let her give them quick hugs and wet kisses. I'm going to get this sweetie tucked back into bed, he said. I'll do the same with this big sweetie, said Brenda. Thanks, said Freddie, clasping Alan's free hand. Hey, I'm always happy to burn the midnight oil as long as the beer holds out. The tears had stopped. Alan's expression of mingled shock and joy was gone, replaced by the satisfied look of a man lucky enough to take a certain amount of happiness for granted. This is real to him. Freddie could feel his own mind shifting and rearranging. He remembered he lived just down the street at 485 Fremont and forgot a 2-bedroom apartment in West Philly. Soon the old me won't exist. Freddie smiled at the thought. He stepped out into the night, his arm around the woman he loved. He wondered if someday he would dream about a thin man in an expensive black suit with a bullet in his side. Then the mystic circuit closed, and the great should have been became simply what was. That's the end. Dang it. No monsters, no killing. All right.
Oh, Rick, that was so sweet. But one
Didn't
of the
think I
things
had
that
to end it, did you?
I don't know, it's one of those things like with a well-told story, you may not, when you get to the end, the end might surprise you, but it's right. It feels like that's the only way it really could have gone. So yeah, I think I did know you had it in you.
Okay, fine.
But one thing I love about it is that even though they're sort of rewriting their whole lives, nothing's too perfect. And I wonder if that's part of the magic of making a story that works.
Mm-hmm.
That's more honest and true to life. What a great night, you two. Thank you so much for these stories. Well, I'll be back next week because I just can't get enough of the stories, as you know. Next week's probably going to be a bit spooky, though, because next week we have Rhiannon Rasmussen and Lauren Rhodes. But, it's always a good idea to check storyhour2020.com the day of, just see if there are any changes. And storyhour2020.com also has the calendar, so you can maybe look a few weeks out and see what other Wednesdays you're going to have to tell people you are definitely busy. But, there are also links to all these previous Wednesdays, so you can go back and watch the story hours you missed or watch your favorites a few more times, like this one maybe. So check that out, storyhour2020.com. Also, the name of our YouTube channel, Story Hour 2020. Karl Dandenell, Frank Oreto, thank you so much for these very moving stories tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Me too. I'm
Thank
hold up my
you
book.
also.
Ooh, sorry.
Thank you also to SIFWA for the grant that helps us keep things running. And thank you to Daniel Marcus, without whom none of us would be here because there would be no story hour. And now that's so glad it's not that way. The great should have been absolutely always has story hour. And it always has you watching and enjoying these stories with us. And as long as we all enjoy these stories, we're all together in the same story hour. Good night.
Right.